Somewhere in an alleyway of a large Chinese city, a man in a red shirt is running away from someone in fear, not realizing why he is being punished. Then he stopped abruptly, trying to listen to the footsteps of his pursuer. Hearing nothing, the man realized that he had broken away from the chase and exhaled relaxedly. Suddenly, a stranger came up from behind and put a knife blade to his throat. The assassin's footsteps were so quiet that even the wind walking through the narrow alley was better heard. Feeling the dagger at his throat, the man in the red shirt asked the stranger to wait and promised to give all the money he had. "Die!" said the murderer indifferently, unwilling to listen to his victim any longer. He then slit his target's throat, thus fulfilling the contract. The next morning, this guy yawning with fatigue is named Shinjo Kai and is 17 years old. He is a high school student and an assassin by occupation. It was this morning that he realized that, after all, it had been a stupid decision to go to school right after his night job. Soon the exhausted boy came to school. Walking up to the office he needed, the guy opened the door and looked inside. Most of his classmates had arrived first and, breaking into groups, were already chatting about their own things. But that didn't bother the boy. He shoved his hands in his pockets and walked leisurely to his desk while the other students looked at him strangely. Approaching Shinjo, student number 35, Mito Shuji, who is the head trump card of the soccer club and also the class president, greeted his classmate in a friendly manner. "Uh-huh," Shinjo Kai emotionlessly replied, taking a seat at his desk. Then the boy simply rested his head on the table and fell asleep, driving his headmen into a stupor with such actions. Poofed, he's as insufferable as ever. Nagasho Reina, student number 22, who was the unspoken leader of the girls in the class, said indignantly. When the girl approached the head teacher, she asked perplexedly why he was still messing around with this guy. Mito awkwardly replied that Shinjo was a classmate of theirs. However, the fact that he came to school and immediately fell asleep means that this boy has no sense of tact at all. At that moment, the classroom door opened and a sturdy guy who looked like a bully appeared on the threshold. Then, with an irritated look at him, Nagasho said that this kid was even worse than Shinjo Kai. This is student number 1, Arashi Shunsky. He is known in the neighborhood as the head of the bullies. Running up to him, two classmates wished good morning to Arashi-san. After saying hello to them too, the bully glanced at the guy sitting in the farthest corner of the office on the last desk. Seeing that this boy was shamelessly sleeping with his head resting on the desk, he tisked unhappily. "Hey you!" Arashi muttered irritably, walking over to his sleeping classmate. But Shinjo just ignored him and continued to sleep soundly. Realizing that he was not being listened to, the angry bully told the guy that if he continued to sleep, he would be in trouble. Unable to bear such insolence, Arashi called out to the boy again and tried to grab him by the scruff of the neck. But suddenly someone grabbed him firmly by the wrist. Looking dumbfounded at Shinjo, the bully asked what the hell was going on. Meanwhile, a guy yawning with fatigue sitting at his desk lifted his head. "Well, what do you want?" "I want to sleep," Shinjo Kai asked coldly, glancing at Arashi. When he felt that he could not move his arm, the irritated bully demanded that he let go of his arm at once. At the same second, Shinji squeezed Arashi's arm with great force, causing a crunch to be heard. I'm sorry, I didn't notice," the sleepy boy said mockingly, finally letting go of the bully's wrist. Abruptly pulling his hand away, Arashi Shunsuke looked at the boy with hatred. "Creepy asshole," he said tensely, kneading the aching wrist of his hand. At the same instant, the number 8 student sitting at a nearby desk, Kazaki Rin, asked the two of them to be quiet. This girl is the top beauty of the class. She is particularly talented in literature and martial arts, but she keeps a low profile. The bully leader looked at her angrily and asked if she was going to be impertinent. Suddenly, one of his classmates stood in front of the guy, dumbfounded by this sudden movement. Her name is Hashimoto Mirei, and she is student number 29. She is a very strict girl who respects order in everything. That's why she was elected as a member of the disciplinary committee. She jumped down from her chair and asked Arashi to stop before he broke anything. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, knock it off! You're just going to get ignored anyway," said student number 23, sitting indifferently in his desk. That's Narumi Ryu, an easygoing guy, or at least he tries to be. As he listened to the three of them, Arashi was confused about which one of them he wanted to drag more. Shinji, who had fallen asleep behind him again, snored loudly. With a disgruntled chuckle, the angry bully leader sat down at his seat and put his feet on the desk with a clatter. Soon the bell rang for class and all the students settled into their seats. Kazaki Rin, the class beauty, closed her book while thinking about something. Kagura High School. First grade, second year of school. In this class, such conflict scenes are a daily routine. Thinking about it, Shinji Kai finally fell into slumber. After a while, he opened his eyes, feeling something strange. Did Mito, the head of the class, have something underfoot? What the hell is that? Is this some kind of portal? After noticing a strange phenomenon under their feet, all the students in the class went into a panic. They didn't realize what was happening. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Meanwhile, the unknown portal had already taken up space in the auditorium. What the hell is that? The puzzled headman asked, looking at the floor in surprise. Realizing that this was not the time to think about it at the moment, Mito glanced at his classmates and advised everyone to leave the classroom now. But it wasn't until Shinji realized that they simply wouldn't make it in time. It's late. There's no more time left. At the same second, there was a bright flash, blinding everyone in the office. In a moment, all the students were in a large stone room with antique columns and a large door. Lifting up from the cold floor, Shinji immediately tried to figure out what this place was, a building made of stone and huge columns as fortifications. The boy had only one explanation for it. As hard as it was to believe, he and all of his classmates were swallowed up by this white light, and then the entire class was moved somewhere. While the boy was thinking about it, the rest of the high school students also woke up. Looking around, each of them couldn't understand what this white light was and where they had all gotten to. The headman then asked everyone to calm down. He didn't know what had happened either, but first of all, Mito would want to make sure that no one was hurt. Smiling contentedly, Shinji mentally noted that the headman had made a pretty good move. He was able to calm even those who were one step away from panic. However, there was one among the classmates who disagreed with Mito. Arashi glanced at the headman and said that there was no point in wasting time. The bully thought that if this guy wasn't going to deal with the situation, there was nothing to talk to him about. Arashi turned around and headed for the door, ordering his subordinates to follow him. On the one hand, the kid is right. But even as he realized that, Shinji asked Arashi to wait a bit. When the head of the hooligans turned around and asked the boy what he wanted, he told him that he could hear footsteps outside the door. Someone's coming this way. Dumbfounded, Arashi turned around and looked tensely at the exit of the room and wondered if it was true. That's right. There can be no mistake. There's at least two of them. A man and a woman. The only question is what they want and with what intentions they walk into that room now. The door opened and an elderly man in a cloak and a gray-haired woman stepped inside, which is to be expected of hero candidates. You've managed to keep your composure. The girl entered, giving a friendly smile. The high school students looked at her in surprise and couldn't believe that she was standing in front of them. But what is she wearing? Cosplay? In fact, these two look like a knight and a princess from the Middle Ages. Plus, she said something about heroes. What could it mean? Hiding behind one of the pillars, Shinji Kai noticed that the man with the sword was well built physically, and the wary atmosphere around him. He's strong, and this isn't just a cosplay. As for the girl, she's had some training, but nothing remarkable. It is a pleasure to meet you. My name is Leonora, and I am the Archbishop of the sacred land of Digrest, and next to me is my knight Gale. The girl introduced herself, looking at the chosen heroes. Irritated, Arashi pointed his finger at her and asked her what the hell she was talking about. This kid had never heard of such a country in his life. In turn, the gray-haired woman explained that it was no bullshit, but she could understand the guy's point of view. Mito apologized to the strangers and told them that they had no idea how they'd gotten here, so they were a little confused. Then he asked them to tell him what was going on. Leonora, of course, did not refuse the boy's request. As a matter of fact, that was why she had come here. The simplest way to describe your situation is this, the girl pronounced, glancing at the high school students. You have been summoned to another world. For you are the hope of mankind that can overthrow the Demon King. You are the candidates for heroes. While Mito scratched the back of his head and said that the girl's story was hard to believe, a bully standing nearby asked the stranger to stop talking about some incomprehensible nonsense. With an angry glance at the insolent boy, the elderly knight advised him to choose his expressions. He was facing the saint of this country, after all. In turn, an angry Arashi told the old man to shut up, and then promised to kill him if he continued to show off. You seem to understand your place only after you know pain, Nightingale said, gripping the hilt of his sword. But when Leonora asked him to stop, the older man immediately refused. The knight explained that even if the kid didn't understand much, it would be better if he could rein him in now. All right then, die, old man! Arashi shouted angrily as he ran up to Gale. Shinji realized that this guy was brave enough to challenge the man with the sword. Arashi Shunsuke is used to fighting against opponents with weapons. The key is to dodge the first blow and strike from below. He finds it even more comfortable to fight with his bare hands. But in the next second, as the enemy pulled the blade from its sheath, the lad realized how badly he had been wrong. Arashi didn't even notice the movement of the sword, but his forehead was already wounded and bleeding. That's when Gale explained that he had only intentionally messed up his skin now. After that, he asked the boy if he would continue. Leonora, on the other hand, told her loyal knight that this was enough, after which she asked him to put his sword away. I apologize for the rude welcome. We never meant you any harm, Leonora began to say, looking at the guests of this world. The reason why you are in this world I will explain to you now, right down to the smallest detail. So first of all, please observe silence. In this world, humanity is currently experiencing a Demon King invasion and is on the verge of extinction. Our sacred country of Digrest also continues the resistance. But we are not fully capable of resisting the invaders. After listening to the Archbishop, Shinji remarked that the story of the Demon King was rather strange. Meanwhile, Leonora concluded her monologue by saying that for all of humanity, the teenagers who had come here from another world were candidates for heroes and the last hope. In other words, we have to defeat the Demon King? Mito clarified dumbfoundedly, glancing at the gray-haired girl. Then, smiling nervously, Narumi Ryuya said that was impossible. None of the people here have even fought once. Even more than that, not everyone is able to simply endure this situation. Looking at the seniors, Gale explained that, whatever it was, they would have to do it. Besides, the only way for them to return to their world is to defeat the Demon King. Petrified with fear, the teens looked at the knight, not wanting to believe what they were hearing. Shinji himself doesn't know if what the old man just said was a lie, but it looks like Gale is trying to prepare the boys' classmates for the worst. Although, even if they accept the situation, people who have lived carefree days are not going to go on a killing spree out of the blue. It takes experience, and especially talent. You called us here to save your asses, and you don't give a damn what we think. Arashi, bleeding with blood, suddenly said angrily. Did these two really think that those who came from the other world would silently obey and indulge them? What are you staring at? You're annoying me! Hearing this, Nightingale realized that even after an absolute defeat, this fellow had not lost his fighting spirit. He was indeed a promising fighter. It may become a serious threat in the future. Therefore, you should get rid of it right now. But just as Gale thought of this, the Archbishop stepped in front of him, and uttering the words, "Grant me healing," began to treat the wound on the bully's forehead. It only took a couple seconds and the wound healed. The girl then confessed that they were guilty before the children for having brought them here. With a sigh, Leonora asked the chosen heroes to forgive her for all her sins. Standing aside, a surprised Nagase asked the Archbishop what that light was. Then the gray-haired woman explained that it was the power of sorcery. She used the miraculous power granted to her by the god Digrest. This temporarily brings a new law into the world, and as Leonora suggests, it's better known to the inhabitants of the other world as magic. From her words, Shinji, hiding behind the pillar, realized that this girl and apparently the others knew the culture of the other world. Was this not their first call? Meanwhile, the Archbishop had already headed towards the class headman. This power is the main reason you are here, the girl explained, touching Mito's head with her hand. In the same instant, the guy felt as if his blood in his veins had frozen abruptly and his whole being began to change. Covering her face with her hand from the blinding light that suddenly appeared in her classmates' palms, Nagase noticed Mito Shuji's hands sparkling. And at the same moment, the light in his hand became a sword. The Archbishop, however, explained that her miraculous power could awaken the power of blessing in hero candidates. The power is given randomly, and the girl cannot change it. Leonora realizes how self-serving her request is, yet she asks the teenagers to lend their strength to the country. But the headman in turn replied that it didn't matter how much strength the Archbishop gave them. It wouldn't make ordinary high school students fight better. With her head bowed, the gray-haired girl said that she understood that visitors to this world would have to go through rigorous training. And of course, the country of Digrest promises that it will take full care of the candidates. After listening to her, Mito didn't hesitate long and agreed. Guys, listen up! For the sake of our own survival, we need defense and knowledge first and foremost right now, shouted the headmaster, addressing his classmates. In an emergency, a blessing could save them. So why don't teenagers listen to these two people? After listening to Mito, all the classmates realized that this was the only way out and immediately agreed. When Leonora heard their decision, she smiled and thanked the children. Then she asked to be allowed to give them God's blessing. Hashimoto Mirai received the blessing of telekinesis. The blessing of the explosion went to Arasi Syunsky. Following them, the rest of the class received their abilities as well. Did everyone get their gift? The Archbishop asked awkwardly, noticing that the children had already started having fun with their new superpowers. Stepping out from behind the pillar, Shinjo Kai raised his hand and said that he still hadn't received his blessing. When the guy came up to Leonora, the girl apologized to him and said that she hadn't noticed him. After these words, she put her hand on the boy's shoulder. At the same moment, Shinjo felt that something was wrong with his vision. As he looked at the Archbishop standing before him, the guy saw the system window in front of her face. This girl's name is Leonora Digrest, and she is 18 years old. It also stated that her attack is equal to A rank, defense and dexterity to D. Physical strength only reaches the level of E, but as for magic power, it is at its highest rank of S. On top of all this, the boy saw Leonora's skills and their levels. While the boy was trying to figure out what had happened to his vision, the Archbishop explained that apparently he had gotten the blessing of an appraisal. This is a great rarity. The boy looked at her with a puzzled look and asked what score meant. The girl told him that it could be used to find out details about the strength and skills of the target. Realizing the essence of his newfound power, Shinjo decided to try something. He looked at his palm and activated the blessing. The system immediately popped up a statistics window in front of his eyes. Shinjo Kai, 17 years old. Attack, B, defense, F dexterity, B physical strength, C magical strength, E. On top of that, the guy had several useful skills pumped up to level 5. Among them were killing technique, short sword wielding, throwing technique, and stealth. After studying his characteristics a bit, the boy finally realized that everything he needed was displayed in this window. It looks like a game window. It was also quite simple to understand. But the moment the unsuspecting lad was looking out the system window, behind him, he sensed danger approaching. At the same second, Arashi pounced on him, using his blast blessing. Shinjo immediately dodged the blow, and the bully in turn used his fist to smash through the stone floor where the boy had recently stood. Straightening up, the enemy left a huge dent in the ground beneath him. "What do you think? I've got the power of the explosion. How about you?" Arashi asked mockingly, looking haughtily at his hated classmate. Afterward, he mockingly remarked that the guy could do nothing else but make his eyes red. Most of the classmates supported the bully and laughed at Shinjo's worthless power too. Looking at the boy, Nagasho agreed with the others' opinions on him. He always acts so arrogant, it even pleased her to see him get crapped on. Meanwhile, looking at his classmates indifferently, Shinjo Kai couldn't understand why they had become so confident. From the information he had received, he couldn't tell exactly how useful these blessings were. This power has been lent to them, and no one knows when they'll decide to take it back. Still, there are plenty of ways to kill someone without a blessing. As Leonora approached the hero candidates, she noticed that each of them now had their own blessing. She realizes that it's hard for the children to control, but one day, their gifts will become the fangs that will pierce the Demon King. After saying that, the Archbishop clapped her hands and said that the guests from the other world seemed to be tired. Therefore, they should have a good rest today. By evening, each of the students who had become hero candidates were taken and assigned to a different room. Before going to bed, Shinjo Kai went out the window and decided to gather more information about what was going on here. 2 guards were walking within the walls of the fortress where the arrivals from the other world were sleeping. One of them was complaining to his superiors for sending him on patrol in the night. But his partner explained that the hero candidates had been brought in today, so there was nothing they could do about it. Then, the still angry knight wondered if these hero candidates could even defend themselves. He'd seen a glimpse of them. They're children. I doubt they even know how to hold a sword. Keep walking with the torch in his hand, the man expressed concern that he didn't believe these guys could defeat the Demon King. It's crazy. His partner reminded him that this is the job of a saint. She must have some kind of plan. This conversation between the 2 patrolmen was overheard by Shinjo hiding behind a tree. This is the 3rd patrol in quite some time. According to the knights, it's clear that the guards have been beefed up. Deciding that this was the perfect opportunity to test his new power, the lad used the blessing of appraisal on one of the guards. At the same moment, the boy realized something interesting. The man he had just scanned only had a level 1 swordsmanship skill. If this guard had miraculous powers, Shinjo might have gotten caught. However, not everyone seems to have it. Running out from behind the tree, the boy decided to change his location to get a better look at the place he and his classmates were in. In fact, he roughly understood the geography around the castle. It's a typical fortress town. 2 guards stand at the main gate of the fortress and guard the entrance. Hiding behind a bush nearby, Shinjo wondered what the situation was like inside the castle. How hard would it be to sneak in while they had reinforced guards? Despite the fact that he was indeed very much interested, the guy decided to take his time and call it a day. Suddenly, he noticed 3 female classmates standing nearby in a field. Asking her friends in a trembling voice if they were really allowed to do this, the worried girl with dark hair pointed out that the guards could spot them at any time. Looking at her confidently, the blonde wondered if she was afraid. They'll just practice the blessing, that's all. At the very least, they could blame it on Hashimoto. Looking thoughtfully at the flames created with her finger, Nagasho Rina explained that she wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. At least it would be good for her. After these words, the 3 girls began to study the workings of the power bestowed upon them today. The Shinjo Kai sitting behind a rock was watching all of this unnoticed. God's blessing, huh? All of this makes the guy uneasy, so he decided that the best option now would be to watch these girls for a while. But at the same instant, the boy felt something strange. Dazedly turning around, he realized that some unknown creature was approaching here. The classmates standing in the field also heard a strange sound somewhere in the thicket of tall grass. Scared, the girls looked there for a while, trying to figure out what kind of creature was hiding from them. It wasn't human, judging by the sounds it was making. Suddenly, a lizard-like monster jumped out of the tall grass and looked at the high school girls. Seeing this terrible monster, the girls screamed in terror. Shinjo Kai had never seen a beast like this before. It really looks like a lizard. At the same moment, the guy decided to scan the assessments of the unexpectedly appeared opponent with his blessing. The name of this creature is Lizard Val. Apparently, however, it is not a name, but the name of its species. Be that as it may, it doesn't matter right now. If you study his stats better, you'll notice that this monster's status is sudden. He gained this status due to stunning the girls. While the boy was trying to figure out what he should do with this information, the lizard raised his head and breathed air into his lungs. The very next second, a deafening scream from the monster rang out. After realizing that the creature was aggressive, the 3 girls rushed to run away from it. They immediately ran into the tall grass to try to hide there from the monster running after them. Shinjo, who was watching from the side, noticed that the lizard is a real brawler. He attacked the humans without a second thought. It moves fast on all 4s, but linearly. And this monster doesn't seem to have much intelligence. It looks big, but if you use a knife, it's easy to kill. Just thinking about it, Shinjo Kai, who had climbed to the top of the rock, took out a knife from his sleeve and immediately threw that at the lizard. The blade of the dagger flew a few meters and embedded itself into the thick scales of the enemy. The perplexed monster returned to the rock from which the knife had come, but saw no one there. Shinjo, on the other hand, had long ago hidden behind another hiding place. His plan had worked, but it wasn't very deep early on. Still not realizing where the dagger came from, the lizard once again rushed after the boy's classmates. At that instant, one of them tripped over a small rock lying on the grass. Nagasho Reina fell face first into the ground. Turning around to look at her, one of her friends decided to help her. But grabbing Tsunami's sleeve, the other girl shouted that there was no time for that. And when Rina lifted herself off the ground, holding her aching cheek, an enraged Val lizard was already standing behind her. Realizing the danger she was now in, the girl turned around frightened at the monster. The creature stared mercilessly at its victim, preparing to tear it to pieces. That's when Rina realized she was finished. There was no way she was going to make it out of here in time. The monster swung a paw to tear the girl apart, while her friend stood by helplessly and just watched, unable to do anything to help. Covering her head with her hands in despair, Rina cried out in fear. However, when she opened her eyes, the girl saw that the lizard was lying dead in front of her, with a bloody throwing knife sticking out of its body. This dagger struck the monster's head with astonishing accuracy, hitting a vital point. Realizing that the danger was over, her friends immediately ran up to a frightened Renee and asked if she was okay. But the girl was no longer listening to them. She was trying to understand what had happened. Had someone saved her? The classmates helped their friend to her feet and immediately suggested that they get out of here as soon as possible. They didn't want to run into another creature. Meanwhile, standing behind the tree, Shinjo Kai heard the 3 leave. There was no particular reason to kill the lizard, but if the guy just left, who wouldn't be able to sleep properly? As he approached the creature's corpse, the boy pulled the knife from its head and wondered, did such monsters roam everywhere in this world? It looked like the boy wouldn't be able to walk around much today. At the same moment, Shinjo felt something strange again. Since he had no idea what to expect from the next danger, the guy made the decision to hide behind the lizard's corpse. There was a suspicious silence, and the only thing that stood out in the landscape was the very rock on which the boy had thrown his first knife. Carefully peeking out from behind the monster's body, Shinjo began to observe this strange stone. There was absolutely someone out there. Thinking about it, he realized that he had to get out of here before the creature behind that rock noticed him. At the same instant, the boy seemed to vanish. Running from cover to cover, he fled from the scene. After a while, an unknown man in a black cloak came out from behind a rock. Approaching the dead lizard, he crushed its head with one foot. The hero candidates are just minor sleuths. I'm even disappointed. The man in the cloak covered in monster blood said aloud. But there is one with a similar odor, the stranger added contentedly, licking the blood off his cheek. In one of the castle's rooms, the corpse of a long-dead monster with its head split open lies on the stone floor. Upon seeing this terrifying sight, the high school students were petrified. While the blonde guy was examining the creature's body, Gale told the children that the monster had been loitering near the walls of the capital last night. After listening to him, Mito looked at the lizard corpse puzzled. Standing nearby, Arashi also looked at the monster and hesitated. At this moment, after hearing what the Archbishop's personal knight said, one of the classmates asked where the monster came from. Gale explained that the monsters are minions of the Demon King and they like to eat human flesh. Now the hero candidates would be their prime targets. Turning to the blonde guy with glasses sitting by the corpse, the old man called him steady and asked if he'd found out anything. Pulling his bloody fingers out of the monster's body, the blonde told him that there were traces of sorcery. It was definitely the work of a mid-level demon, if not higher. Perhaps a rumor of hero candidates reached them, and they decided to scout the situation. Hearing the word sorcery, Shinjo noticed that it was something new. It was clearly different from the miraculous power that Leonora had bestowed. Walking up to Steady, still studying the lizard's body, the class headman asked if this monster was controlled by a demon. Straightening up, the blonde was surprised that the guy had guessed so quickly, after which he remarked that he was indeed correct in his thinking. Strong demons are able to control monsters. To do so, they use a technique called slave sorcery. First, monsters are plants and animals mutated with mana. They are categorized by ferocity and strength, and only a living organism can become a monster. The main source of their mana is evil. In other words, the Demon King is the source of their life. It makes sense that he and his minions are able to control the monsters. Noticing that Steady was talking too much, Gale told him to stop, then added that it was time for them to leave. The boy disagreed, shouting that he hadn't explained everything yet. I still have so much to learn, don't I? The blonde wailed in despair, as the Archbishop's personal knight grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and dragged him behind him. Shinju Kai realized that this researcher could be used to gather information in the future. But the main problem now is what drove this thing lying on the ground. That time when Shinjo watched the monster running after the girls, the lizard's status changed to submission. Po means that at that moment the guy sensed the presence of a demon behind that tall rock. He's quite skilled. It's a miracle the boy managed to spot him. Maybe he's still around. Suddenly, Shinjo felt a strange aura behind him. It felt like someone was watching him. So scared of imminent death? Don't be afraid. Out of nowhere came a voice in my head. When the voice died down, the boy was still in a stupor for a while, trying to figure out what it was. He couldn't say for sure if it was real or if he'd just heard it. It was just a feeling, but not something obvious. But was it? While the boy was puzzled, Arashi approached the elderly knight and explained to his classmates that their goal was to defeat the Demon King. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to return home. That was why he wasn't going to stay here for long. Noting that he was right for once, the class beauty and the head teacher agreed with his decision. Right. If they wanted to go home, there was no other choice. However, not everyone is so determined. Some of them are simply unable to fight monsters. They're terrified at the mere thought of it. Looking at his classmates, Shinjo noticed that they were too bold because this world was like a game. But the fact that they were in a different world didn't change the essence of war. Killing would still be necessary. They better realize that soon. Meanwhile, the Archbishop entered the room and asked the children not to hurry so much. The girl explained that they hadn't yet realized the full extent of their new powers. Teenagers need to go through training first. Regardless, the people of Digrest have summoned them to this world as hero candidates. The speed of progress of those arriving from another world is different from that of the local inhabitants. And now it's been a full week since I started my intense workouts. Sitting in the fortress library, Shinjo tried to read one of the books. However, as expected, he couldn't understand a word of what was written there. If you think about it, it's strange that people from different worlds can communicate freely with each other without language barriers. Pulling his attention away from the book, the boy looked out the window thoughtfully to see how the others were doing. Outside, all of his classmates were practicing with swords and magic, splitting into groups. Shinjo's inherited appraisal is not the most suitable blessing for combat. He was forbidden from training, but was given access to the library. Knowledge is also power, isn't it? Leonora said with a smile. And of course, in all classmates, this phrase, to put it mildly, laughed. Despite the fact that the guy can understand absolutely nothing in these manuscripts, one thing has come to his attention. There seems to be only one history of the country in this library. Surprisingly, not a single book says anything about demons. Once outside, the boy continued to watch the high school students practice. Leonora really didn't lie. They are developing by the hour, not by the day. And there are 5 of the best among them. Narumi, able to shatter anything with the power of wind with just his fingers, and Arashi with his blessing of explosion. Kanzaki with the power of control. Hashimoto, who can move large objects with her telekinesis. She is also Nagashorina, who has become an excellent ranged mage thanks to her pyrokinesis. Besides, there is one man who has surpassed them all. There was an annoyed shout, and the steel sword knocked out of his hands flew high into the air. After a while, he fell and stabbed his blade into the ground. Looking at his blade, the disarmed knight immediately gave up, noting that it was amazing that this guy was already stronger than him. And that guy was Mito Shuji, the head of the class. Lowering his sword, the boy said that he only achieved such results because of his teacher's instruction, and he was truly grateful to him for that. While the guy was chatting with his coach, Shinjo, standing nearby, decided to scan his stats. Just a week ago, Mito's numbers were all around D and F. Now everything has changed drastically. Attack, agility, magic power. All of these items have increased to A rank. The remaining defense and physical strength have also risen a lot. All the way up to B. Even if Mito is a genius, this is just an unimaginable leap. Does God's blessing not only give the ability, but also affect the bodies of the owners? Soon, some of the students in the class finished practicing and headed towards Shinjo standing against the wall nearby, chatting with each other. When some of his classmates came up to him, they started pestering him with questions about what he was doing at the training ground if he couldn't fight. Let him sit quietly and read his textbooks. Here they go again. The boy thought indifferently as he looked at them. Aside from Arashi and his subordinates, the others had also begun to look down on Shinjo. Apparently, this is a result of the growth of their forces. Don't ignore me. We're friends, aren't we? One of the classmates said haughtily, holding out his hand to the boy. At the same moment, something pushed his ankle hard, and the student trying to bully was knocked off his feet. The last thing he had time to see before his head hit the ground was Shinjo putting his foot forward. What's wrong with you? Did you fall down on the ground? Did you hurt yourself? The boy asked, looking at his suddenly fallen classmate. Everyone else just stared dumbly at their stupid friend, who had folded up ridiculously in the fall. But when a classmate decided to take revenge on Shinjo, Arashi told her to get behind him and warned her that she was coming. At the same second, Leonora and her personal knight came out to the range. As she passed by Shinjo, she smiled at him and all those standing nearby. Noticing the Archbishop with guile, all the hero candidates stopped their training and their coach sat down on his knee in front of the girl. Thank you for your attention, Leonora said in a friendly tone, looking at everyone here. Turning to the children, she remarked that they had all made remarkable progress. Even the Archbishop had not expected such rapid progress. That was why she had decided to accelerate the schedule. With a wary glance at the Archbishop, Narumi Ryuya asked what she meant by accelerating the schedule. Did the girl really want to send them all after the Demon King's head right now? Why, I wouldn't ask you to do such a thing. The tasks are much simpler. It's time for you to sit down in a real battle with a monster, Leonora explained, closing her eyes. Hearing this, everyone tensely looked at the gray-haired girl. Monster fight. Is it too soon for only 1 week of training? Soon, the whole class, together with Gale and his mistress, went to the forest. The knight told the children that today was the day for practice and that it would take place here. Moving in a large group will not work as it will only get in the way. Therefore, the hero candidates will be divided into teams of 2 or 3. When Nagasho heard this condition, she immediately called Shuji to join her team. The blonde girl standing next to her also asked to join the team. Since some of Arashi's entourage knew that this guy could take out any monster they met, they immediately asked to join his team. The head of the bullies didn't object and told them to do whatever they wanted. The classmates continued to divide among themselves. Soon, all the teams were formed. Noticing that all the students were divided into squads, Gale was ready to begin the test. But suddenly, he noticed something strange. There were still 2 hero candidates left, standing with their backs to each other and seemingly not going to team up with anyone. Closing her eyes frustratedly, Kanzaki explained to Gale that for some reason, no one had invited her to the group. In fact, it was her own fault. At school, she interacted with everyone coldly and did not like company. That's why her classmates are afraid to approach her. Turning around to the guy behind her, the girl remarked that she had no choice but to team up with him, and then asked Shinjo if he was okay with it. The boy didn't refuse and told her to do as she pleased. Kanzaki Rin, self-confident and cold-blooded. She acts very proudly, not letting anyone get in her way. Feeling Shinjo's gaze on her, the girl turned to look at him. Looking at the guy perplexed, the girl asked why he was looking at her like that. Turning away, the hooded classmate told her not to worry and to forget about it. Meanwhile, the Archbishop explained the conditions of the challenge. The team that defeated the most monsters would receive a special reward. After that, the gray-haired girl wished everyone good luck and announced the start of practice. A few minutes later, Shinjo and Kanzaki silently and leisurely walk alone through the forest, searching for the right monster. I'll tell you right away, my blessing is better than any of our classmates, so you don't even have to do anything. Just stay out of the way. The girl suddenly spoke out, looking at her teammate. The guy didn't contradict her and replied that in that case he was now relying only on her. Fixing her hair, the classmate remarked that this boy had no pride at all. In turn, Shinjo, looking at her back, decided to look at this girl's fighting potential first. Continuing to follow Kanzaki, the guy sensed 4 signals around him at once. Apparently, the monsters had decided to surround them. At the same moment, a small goblin with a club came out from behind the bushes. Seeing the monster in front of her, Kanzaki stopped abruptly, and Shinjo, who was following her, began to watch what his classmate would do. Without a second's hesitation, the goblin pounced on the girl, swinging his wooden club. "Fall down!" Kanzaki shouted, stretching her arm forward and activating her blessing. The monster, who had no time to do anything, was immediately pinned firmly to the ground without a single chance to move. While the classmate straightened up her opponent, Shinjo watched her strength carefully. This is Kanzaki's blessing of control, the power to make others do her bidding. Continuing to stand still, the guy warned the girl that there were more monsters around. Hearing this, Kanzaki immediately ordered the opponent under her blessing to drop their weapons. Then, by the same method, she demanded that the goblin put his hands behind his back. Glancing at the girl, Shinjo wondered what was going on with her. She looked rather tired. The classmate explained that if you used the blessing for too long, it was very exhausting. Realizing that the energy consumption was colossally high, the guy turned around and advised Kanzaki to quickly kill this monster before the others pulled up. Looking at the tearing goblin, the girl asked how he could be killed. "He's so much like a human." "So what of it? He attacked us, remember? They're our enemies. Leaving them alive makes no sense," the boy explained, glaring coldly at his classmate. Slightly stammering, Kanzaki agreed with the guy and said she understood him. Picking up a small rock from the ground, Shinjo realized that this girl would not make it. Even with her powers, she's still just a confused schoolgirl. Well, the important thing is that she makes the right decision when the danger comes. While the guy was calmly tossing the stone in his hand, the other monsters had already come out of hiding, preparing to attack their enemies. The goblins began to close in on the hero candidates, and Kanzaki, he in turn continued to keep his only opponent immobilized. Shinjo immediately informed his classmate that the monsters were out. "Fall down!" The heavily tired girl shrieked again, applying her control blessing on the other monsters. At that very second, she started to get a lot of panting. Continuing to look at all of this and do nothing, Shinjo asked her classmate what she was going to do next. The girl, on the other hand, told the guy to shut up and asked him to help, not to stand still. However, the boy reminded her that she herself had told him to stay out of the way. After a bit of silence, Kanzaki realized what her classmate wanted her to do. He wants her to kill those monsters. Realizing that she had no other choice, the main beauty of the class waved her hand and ordered the monsters to wring their necks. Clutching their heads, the goblins began to shake with fear. A moment later, all four opponents played chop suey on the violin, performing a beautiful symphony. And it was the first time Kanzaki had ever seen death with her own eyes. Can one really be forced to do such a thing? Shinjo asked in surprise, looking at the goblin corpses. The girl confirmed this, noting that it might not work for everyone. The stronger the opponent, the less chance of success. To tell you the truth, getting involved in real combat and seeing dead bodies. That's not how I envisioned it, Kanzaki said, looking at the dead monster bodies with pity. Calming down his classmate, the boy reminded her that these goblins attacked themselves. In other words, they're the enemy. The enemy must be killed, no matter if it's a monster or a human. You have to kill if you want to stay alive. The girl looked at the boy in surprise and asked why he was so calm. He didn't even have any strength. Noting that there wasn't much to eat, the guy examining the corpse explained to his classmate that he wasn't scary, and that was one of his strengths. Then, turning back to Kanzaki, the boy inquired as to what she would do. Move on? If she was afraid, the two of them could safely return. After pondering his words once more, the girl looked thoughtfully at the corpses of the decapitated monsters. Turning around, she proudly replied that they weren't going back to anywhere. The classmate then beckoned Shinjo to follow, adding that they were moving on. Now this girl is stubborn, but she has a stable psyche. You can work with that. By the way, I wonder how the rest of you are doing. Narumi Ryuya, running away from the unknown creature, looked dumbfounded at the monster and asked the girl running beside him what to do about it. Hashimoto asked the boy not to ask her about it, and then told him that she had heard that the monsters here were weak. "Shit!" cried out the boy hopelessly, stopping abruptly. Together with Hashimoto, they decided to put everything on the line and try to use their blessings to try and deal with the enemy. Narumi immediately used his in wind power, combining it with his classmate's telekinesis to lift the stone. Casting a joint spell, the two launched a huge rock at the monster, like a projectile from a cannon. As it flew into the creature, the boulder shattered into small pieces. But the monster itself was unharmed. This stone did not damage it at all, as the enemy has very strong armored scales. As they fell to the ground, Narumi Ryu finally realized the predicament they had gotten themselves into. How the hell do you deal with a monster like that? Just recently, Kanzaki had promised herself that she would definitely return to her world. She had been raised by her grandfather since birth, and she still hadn't paid him back. This girl had dreamed of making him happy after all, and she's sure her sudden disappearance is making her grandfather very sad. Following her classmate leisurely, Shinju Kong wondered how long she was going to go in a straight line. It wouldn't take long to get lost. The girl replied that as long as they walked straight ahead, they wouldn't get lost. If you really believe that, you obviously haven't been in the woods much, the boy objected, looking up as he continued to follow her. Irritated, Kanzaki turned on him and asked the boy to be quiet. But it wasn't until she looked at Shinjo that she realized something. Just a little while ago, he was acting so terrifyingly, but now he was rather calm. What's that guy all about? Noticing the girl's gaze on him, the boy asked what was wrong. Did he really have something on his face? Turning away, the classmate simply asked him to ignore it. At the same moment, the two men heard a scream. Kanzaki immediately recognized Hashimoto's voice. Noticing that it looked like she was into something, Shinjo asked his partner how they would proceed. Of course we'll help. I hope she's not hurt, Kanzaki replied, heading in the direction of the screams. Taking a look at the girl, the guy noticed that she was surprisingly genteel. With a perplexed look at her comrade, the classmate asked what he had thought of her before. But realizing that it didn't matter now, she suggested hurrying up. Somewhere nearby in the woods, the sound of a bang was heard. The battered Hashimoto, having missed another blow from her opponent, fell to the ground without strength. With a concerned look at his partner, Narumi Ryuya asked if she was all right. "It's okay, run away." In an exhausted voice, the girl said, looking at the guy. Running up to his classmate, the green-haired boy put his hand on her shoulder and shouted that he wouldn't run away, leaving her here to die. But at the same moment, he heard the furious roar of a monster behind him. Running up to its victims, the armored bear thrust its arm upward, preparing to smash them to the ground. "Monster, stop!" A woman's voice suddenly came from somewhere behind the trees, causing the creature's fist to stop. The girl who saved them at the last moment turned out to be Kanzaki with her blessing of control. While Narumi thanked his savior, the girl warned him that things were bad. He wouldn't be able to hold this monster for long. Watching his classmate's blessing, Shinjo noticed that her power did have different effects on different opponents. Glancing at Narumi, the boy wondered if Hashimoto was alive. Looking worriedly at his classmate, the green-haired boy told him that the girl's wounds were serious, but she was still breathing. "Then grab her and run away from here," Shinjo advised after hearing the terrible state Hashimoto was in now. Throwing a perplexed look at the boy, Narumi replied that there was no way he would run away from here and fight them. Then, Shinjo asked the green-haired boy if he was going to leave the injured Hashimoto to slowly die here. Apologizing to his classmates who came to their rescue, Narumi grabbed the tortured girl and told his rescuers that he now owed them. Before the boy ran off, Shinjo asked him to send Mido or Leonora here if he met them. Soon, Kanzaki and her partner were alone with the armored monster. This problem is quite dangerous even for an experienced assassin like Shinjo. That's why the guy decided to run the assessment of the enemy first, while he was immobilized by his partner's blessing. This creature is called an armored mutant bear. All of the stats are pretty high, but one that stands out among them is defense, which equates to A rank. The stats are really serious, especially the defense. Apparently, this bear has a tough coat. There's no way even Shinjo can break through that. Plus, this monster's name states that it's a mutant. What could that mean? At that moment, Kanzaki cried out that she could no longer keep her blessing activated. The control from his opponent immediately slipped, and the bear, sensing that he was free, raised his paws upward, preparing to strike at the two seniors. In the same second, Shinjo Kong informed his partner that they had gained enough time, and so it was time to run away. The main beauty of the class was happy to hear this, and so she immediately agreed with him, as suddenly, she fell to her knees exhaustedly, unable to rise any further. After apologizing to the guy, the girl explained that she had spent too much energy using the control blessing, and so her legs no longer held her. While Kanzaki was saying this, the monster had already moved closer to finish off the exhausted victim. That's when Shinjo realized that things were bad. However, he had a trump card up his sleeve for just such a moment. Pulling out a smoke grenade from behind his back, he pulled the pin and threw it at the enemy. In the same instant, thick smoke filled the immediate surroundings of the forest, reducing the visibility of the armored mutant bear. Soon, Shinjo had already run far away, hiding behind a tall tree. Naturally, he didn't forget to bring Kanzaki with him as well. The boy then cautioned the girl to refrain from asking questions until they had finally escaped this monster. After a while, the smoke from the grenade cleared, and the bear finally lost its victims. Glancing puzzled at the boy standing next to her, Kanzaki wondered what it was. As he continued to watch the monster, the guy explained that it was a simple smoke bomb. After that, he said that he made it out of boredom while the others were practicing. Of course, it was a lie. Shinjo-kan is always at least minimally armed, so he came into this world with his weapons as well. But unfortunately, the guy's supplies are limited, so he wouldn't really want to waste it unnecessarily. It's only natural for an assassin to carry a weapon. While the boy was musing about it, Kanzaki apologized to him. Not understanding what she meant, the guy asked what was wrong. "Well, I'm the one who said we'd help them, and ended up saving me," the girl excitedly explained. Shinjo, on the other hand, replied that her apology wasn't necessary. If she felt like it, she could just say thank you. "Okay, thanks," Kanzaki said embarrassedly, looking at the guy. Accepting this gratitude, the boy mockingly remarked that if his partner were always so polite, people would be drawn to her in droves. But when the girl almost shrieked in outrage, Shinjo reminded her to be quiet. The monster was still around after all. Looking out from behind the tree, Kanzaki asked her comrade what they should do in such a situation. Maybe they should run as fast as they could, but the boy, also watching the bear, said there was no need. The moment the guy said that, the monster abruptly calmed down. Sensing the approaching danger, the armored mutant bear turned around. "You're the one who injured Narumi and Hashimoto? I'm your opponent now." Mido stepped out from behind the trees, looking confidently at his opponent. In the same second, the class headman activated his blessing called the Sword that protects against evil. A tense battle is about to be fought between a high-ranking monster and the best hero among the class, who has moved to Digrest from another world. Pulling out his sword, Mido pointed it at his opponent and assumed a steady fighting stance. Snapping out of his seat, the boy brought his blade behind his back with a shout, preparing to strike a sprawling blow at the monster. The mutant bear in turn did not stand still either, and with a deafening roar pounced on the armed boy. The class headman had no trouble dodging the enemy's attack, and then grabbing the sword firmly by the hilt with both hands, he lunged back. At the same instant, the sharp blade of the evil defending sword cut through the tough skin of the armored bear. However, even though Mito was able to land one of his best blows on his opponent, the wound inflicted was not very deep. Tensely looking at the creature, the boy realized that it was much more durable than it seemed at first glance. "Shuji, to the side!" Reina, who had extended her arm, suddenly shrieked, using her pyrokinesis on the enemy. A huge fireball immediately flew out of her palm, straight into the armored mutant bear's face. At the same moment, the hot flames set the enemy's entire body on fire, burning his tough skin. Looking confidently at the burning monster, the self-assured girl remarked that she knew it wouldn't stand up to it. After stepping back to a safe distance, the class elder praised Rina, then prepared to attack the weakened enemy. But to the surprise of everyone here, the monster recovered quite quickly from such a powerful fire attack. Glaring angrily at the guy in front of him, the armored bear roared loudly. Dazedly looking at it, Rina worriedly asked how this creature was able to resist. Mito, in turn, without taking his eyes off his opponent, asked his partner to remain calm. Then, noticing that the monster had slowed down, he explained to the girl that her attack had worked. And the three of them, if they take their time, they can beat that bear. "Good, that's right," agreed with their commander, the girl standing behind them. Immediately after that, the three of them began to attack the monster simultaneously, not giving it a second to pause. "It's only a matter of time," muttered the eerily smiling stranger, watching them from the depths of the forest. "It's a skilled assassin called the Demon Delphus. An armored bear isn't going to beat this guy anymore. That speed of development and calmness is amazing. Shuji Mito is special. Delphus only wanted to do a little recon, but now he's going to have to change his plans. He's going to kill that boy right here." Meanwhile, the class headman delivered another slashing blow to the armored bear. After this blow, the monster was finally weakened. His body was completely covered with wounds and was bleeding. "Finish him!" shouted Mito, looking at the exhausted enemy. "Now take that lesson with you to the next world, boy. Things are different in this world, and after killing an opponent, you can never relax." But as soon as the demon Delphus said it out loud, he felt something strange. Someone crept up behind him and put a knife blade to his throat. And that person turned out to be Shinjo Kan, who had sneaked up unnoticed from behind. "Take note, never let your guard down before you kill," the boy advised coldly, using his blessing. In the same second, the knife that the demon held in his hand fell and embedded the blade into the ground. Realizing the hopelessness of his situation, Delphus threw away his weapon and raised his hands. Glancing back at the boy behind him, the man promised to remember his advice. In fact, the demon couldn't believe that this kid had managed to catch him off guard. However, as it was, he couldn't give up that easily. Delphus realized that he had to think of a way to escape, but Shinjo decided not to give his opponent time to think. He slashed the demon's knees in one swift motion. As he fell to the ground, Delphus cried out in pain and marveled at how this guy could wield a knife with such ease and without thought. "Don't yell like that. It'll be too much trouble if Mito and his friends spot us," Shinjo explained as he put his blade to the throat of his opponent, lying on the ground. The guy then promised to let his enemy go if he answered a few questions. Then, turning indignantly round to the boy sitting on him, Delphus asked who he was that the demon should answer his questions. "A shadow from another world," Shinjo explained confidently, looking at his frightened opponent. Realizing something, Delphus gritted his teeth in anger. That creepy aura last night came from that boy. Meanwhile, looking disdainfully at the demon, Shinjo explained that he knew they were being followed. However, there was no way the guy could track Delphus down. That was why the boy had used Mito as bait. That's right, he'd known from the beginning about the demon watching him and his classmates. Shinjo explained to the enemy that they came from another world, and therefore the guy has little information about the structure of this world. He wants the enemy to tell him everything he knows about demons. Nervously glancing at the boy, Delphus asked if he really thought he was going to talk like that. At the same moment, the demon felt a pain piercing to the bone. This pain was so unbearable that the enemy almost fainted. "Honestly, it's more useful for you to tell me everything if you don't want to be in hell on Earth," Shinjo advised, pressing a painful point on his enemy's back with his foot with great force. "Don't underestimate me, kid," the exhausted Delphus muttered in his last breath, looking at the boy with hatred. After saying that, he clenched his jaw with all his might, causing a crunch to be heard. Stunned as he looked at his opponent, the guy immediately realized what he had just done. Beginning to choke, Delphus began to spit out blood. His pupils blurred and the demon screamed in pain. He died without telling the boy anything, not even a few seconds later. Shinjo, pointing his knife at the dead enemy, immediately realized that the man had a suicide poison hidden in his mouth. With a frustrated sigh, the boy noted that they had been quite thorough in their approach. From that moment on, he felt that this Demon King's army would be nothing but trouble. Suddenly, a system beep sounded, and a window popped up in front of the boy's face, alerting him that someone was nearby. "Shinjo, is he dead?" Kanzaki asked, trembling with fear, looking fearfully at the demon's corpse. "Kanzaki," the guy said irritably, turning around to look at the girl. The boy looked thoughtfully at the frightened classmate who had seen the dead demon for a while longer. "Kanzaki, how much have you seen?" Shinjo asked, not taking his wary gaze off her. The frightened girl said that she had seen very little, only how the man had fallen. The guy in turn explained that this dead man was the assassin of the Demon King's army. Moreover, that armored bear is his puppet. The monster that attacked Nagasho and her friends is also his work. After listening to her partner, Kanzaki asked if this demon was really trying to kill them. Shinjo Kang confirmed this, noting that it was obvious that the Demon King's army would send someone to kill the hero candidates. The girl agreed with her boyfriend's inferences, remarking that she was naive. Kanzaki then looked at her comrade and asked how he had noticed the Demon King's assassin. After all, he was the only one who recognized him. Then, looking at his classmate, the boy decided to tell her everything. "In our homeworld, I used to moonlight doing contract killings. That's why I sensed a colleague in the neighborhood," Shinjo-kan explained, looking at the corpse under his feet. Looking at the guy tensely, Kanzaki asked what kind of contract killings he was talking about. Realizing that it didn't sound plausible, the boy told the girl that it was up to her to believe him or not. However, the presence of a corpse lying here is an undeniable fact. Looking seriously at Kanzaki, Shinjo asked her not to tell anyone about what she had seen today. The class is already on edge due to Hashimoto's injury. Looking at the boy excitedly, the girl, stammering a little, promised to keep quiet on the subject. She then remarked that the boy was surprisingly kind. Why be so attentive to the feelings of his classmates? Taking off his hood, Shinjo explained that unlike him, the other classmates were not used to fighting. But the next thing the guy thought of, he didn't bother to tell his partner. He actually acts friendly to gain Kanzaki's trust. Her blessing of control may come in handy for Shinjo in the future. When the two of them returned, all the classmates had already gathered around the badly injured Hashimoto. This girl sitting by a tormented classmate is student number 34, and her name is Hano Shiori. Her blessing is an ordinary healing. Bringing her hand to Hashimoto's wounds and bruises, she healed them with her power in seconds. The rest of the classmates, standing to the side, watched this with genuine amazement. Concerned, Narumi Ryuya ran up to Hano and asked if his partner would be okay. After hearing from the healer that Hashimoto would be completely healthy in an hour, the guy exhaled with relief. After that, he remarked that Mito Shuji was amazing. That bulky thing that attacked them was terrifyingly strong. Pointing at the girls behind him, the class headman agreed, but said that it wasn't difficult to defeat the monster together. Shinju Kang, leaning against a tree nearby, was listening. Closing his eyes, the boy felt an unpleasant sensation. "What are you looking at me for?" Shinjo asked, noticing Kanzaki staring at him. The girl in turn turned away proudly and told him not to take it personally. At that moment, out of nowhere, came the voice of the Archbishop. She said that apparently everyone had already returned. Looking at them indignantly, Narumi asked where they had been missing all this time. Gale explained that he and his mistress were not far from the forest and were doing their job, keeping an eye on the hero candidates. Perplexed by his words, the green-haired boy asked the knight why he hadn't helped at the most dangerous moment. To this, the old man replied that it wouldn't be a workout if he helped the kids every time. Then Mito told Mr. Gale that Hashimoto was in danger and could have died. So why did he just stand by and watch? "In actual battle, anyone's life is in danger of death," replied the knight, looking gravely at the boy. "From now on, this is the only kind of battle that awaits you, so don't whine about something so trivial." However, Mito disagreed with this. They had been tricked after all. Didn't the knight say that this forest only had weak monsters? Stepping into their conversation, Leonora explained that it was most likely the work of a demon assassin. Originally, there had never been armored bears in this forest. It was probably used by demons to assess the strength of candidates. Most likely, the enemy is still hiding somewhere in the forest, and so it wouldn't hurt to beef up security. You should also step up your training, or else everyone will just be killed like insects. Reinforce? Is it really going to be any harder? Weren't the hero candidates already working to the limit? And it turns out they could really be killed at any moment? An indignant Mito shouted to Miss Leonora that this was ridiculous. This is their first real fight. It's obvious that everyone is excited. Even if it's ridiculous, you'll have to go through with it, or else you'll die, replied the Archbishop indifferently. Hearing this, the class headman looked dumbfoundedly at the gray-haired girl. As he came closer, an irritated Arashi said that this was already too much. They summoned him and his classmates to this world, and now they're giving him orders like this? At the same instant, an irritated Gale suddenly appeared in front of the guy with the words, "I'll tell you now so there's no misunderstanding. You're all just pawns of Mrs. Leonora. Don't think you have the right to disobey her!"
Pet the cat.